In this episode, I'm chatting with Julia Karol about being a solo mom by choice. Welcome to the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. I'm Dr. Nicole Calloway Rankins, a board-certified OBGYN who's been in practice for nearly 15 years. I've had the privilege of helping over 1,000 babies into this world, and I'm here to help you be calm, confident, and empowered to have a beautiful pregnancy and birth. Quick note, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Check out the full disclaimer at drnicolerankins.com/disclaimer. Now let's get to it. Hey there. Before we dive into the episode, the Birth with Power Pathway launches in May. And if you're getting ready for your hospital birth, you don't want to miss it. It's the updated version of my online birth course designed to get you calm, confident, and empowered. Hop on my email list now at drnicolerankins.com/email to be the first to know when it's live. Hello there. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. This is episode number 224. Whether this is your first time tuning in or you've been here before, I'm so grateful you're spending some of your time with me today. In today's episode, we have Julia Karol. Julia is a mom, creative leader, warm friend, animal lover, and champion of alternative families. She is a solo mom by choice and the host of Stork'd, a podcast celebrating all families and paths to building a family. When she's not hosting Stork'd, Julia runs a private investment firm. She lives in Boston with her toddler and dog. Julia and I have a great conversation about what made her decide to be a solo mom by choice, what type of support she had around making that choice, her thought process behind choosing a sperm donor versus going with adoption. We talk about the sperm donor industry, the good, the bad, the ugly. We talk about the expenses, whether or not insurance covered it. Just a really great, informative, and interesting conversation that I know you are going to enjoy. Now, before we get into the episode, I have a favor to ask of you. Can you share this podcast with a friend? Sharing is caring, and it helps me to reach and serve more pregnant folks. I am on a mission to reach and serve millions of pregnant people in this country to help them have this great information that you love in the podcast. And I would so appreciate your help in doing that. So share it with your community, share it with your friends, share it on your social media. Always tag me. I'm happy to be tagged and reshare things on my own social media. My favorite platform is Instagram. I'm there at Dr. Nicole Rankins. So I appreciate your help with that. All right, let's get into the conversation with Julia. Thank you so much, Julia, for agreeing to come onto the podcast. I'm glad we are getting to chat despite our stupid technical difficulties first.
Me too. I'm very excited to connect with you today.
Yeah. So why don't you start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your work and your family?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for asking about that in that way, asking about family in the same context, the same breath as who you are as a person, because, that's what I do. In my spare time. So I work in finance professionally full-time, but on the side, my passion is to talk about all the different ways that we think about our family lives, structure our family lives, and create our family lives. And in particular, really trying to display all the different styles and structures of family. So trying to champion alternative families. And the way that came to be is that I am a solo mom by choice. And in the process of trying to figure out what I wanted for my family life, I was newly single and really just knew I wanted to have kids in my life in one way or another, but not sure how to go about it. I started talking to people exactly like you are and just asking with curiosity, like, what is it like to adopt? And what is it like to become a solo mom? And what is it like to choose not to have kids? And I was dating divorced men at the time who had kids. And I said, what is a stepmom experience like? How do you blend a family? And from that, like, oh God, the answers were so good. So it turned into a podcast called Stork'd. And now I just like passionately get to talk about all this good stuff as much as I can.
Yeah, I love that. You know, a lot of times people, or you hear, well, I assume that you still like your finance job. Maybe I'm not projecting, but you know, a lot of times people think you have to follow your passion, and it necessarily may be like the thing that's your work, and maybe you're working towards that. I'm not sure, but I think it's lovely how you took this and made it into something bigger to share with other people. I just think that's really wonderful.
Yeah. You know, I think as humans, we evolve quite a bit. Our family lives evolve, our identities evolve. And so for right now, they are separate. Finance and the podcast are separate, but I'm lucky that I get to do both in my spare time. And who knows? Maybe they'll converge. Maybe one will take over. Maybe one will take a break. Who knows?
There you go. Just staying open to the possibilities.
Totally.
Yeah. So what made you decide to be a single mom by choice? And then I guess also, like, a lot of people think about things, but they don't necessarily like start a podcast about it. So what made you decide to take that route?
Well, I'll answer the second one first, which is, I got to talk to, like, if you and I knew one another, or even if we didn't, if somebody knew you and said, oh, you got to talk to Dr. Nicole, I would call you and be like, oh my God, tell me everything about your family life. And it started very targeted. I want to know what the solo parent experience is like. I want to know what the blending family part is like. But then once you start getting like deep and personal with people, you're at cocktails and the guy next to you at the bar is talking about something. You're like, oh, tell me about what your divorce was like. You're like, okay. So what's amazing about humans is that we're so nuanced and so complex, and everyone has a family of some kind, whether you talk to your family or don't, whether you're in love with the way your family life is currently structured or not. People have families, and they're willing to share their families. And in learning about your family life, you learn about like the deepest parts of someone's soul, you know, what they want, their identity, their hopes, their desires, their disappointments. So I had those conversations, and they were just too good not to share.
Okay. Yeah. Love it. So then what made you decide to be a solo mom by choice?
Yeah. I always say it was my plan B in many ways, which isn't really fair, but it was like, you know, that thing in the back of your head that you're like, okay, if life doesn't work out the way I expect, I guess I could always do this.
Right.
You know, here's another example. If raising kids in the U.S. gets way too expensive, you know, I have this dream of maybe I move to Europe and like, you know, magically have this glorious European life.
Right.
The reality of that is probably negligible. Like it's probably not going to happen.
Right.
But sometimes you think about it and then you start looking up trips and you start thinking about like, okay, which location is better for expats? And the next thing you know, you booked your flight and you're on your way and you're doing it. That was my solo parenting journey. It was like, okay, well, like backup plan, I will do this on my own. And then the more I thought about it and the more I explored it and the more I explored my hopes and dreams, the more I was like, okay, this is it. This isn't plan B. This is plan A.
Okay. Yeah. And then what made you decide, because you could have adopted, what made you decide to do adoption versus getting a sperm donor?
You know, it's interesting because with family building, it's never an either or always, right? You kind of pursue things simultaneously. Things can be sequential. So I'll say I haven't ruled out adoption in its entirety at this stage of my life.
Gotcha.
Nor have I ruled out fostering, which is like another thing that's niggling in the back of my mind is like maybe something I'll do one day.
Okay.
But just before going on the solo parenting journey, I have members of my family who are adopted.
Okay.
And one in particular is a favorite cousin who was adopted from Colombia.
Right.
And this cousin's dad said to me, you know what, for like a senior project, we're going down to Colombia. We're going to visit the orphanage.
Okay.
And, you know, that's going to be written into a whole part of a senior project. Would you like to come?
Right.
And this is my favorite uncle, or I've got a lot of great aunts and uncles. So one of my favorite uncles. And I don't know, did he know I was thinking about having a family on my own? Did he know I was thinking about adoption? Did he know that was like in my heart and soul? I don't think so. I think it was just this fortuitous, come explore this with us. So while there, I got to sit down with this incredible woman, Jimena, who's been running this orphanage adoption agency, child services agency in Bogota for 40 years.
Wow.
I know. And we talked about like how the adoption world has changed, how the way in which they think about adoption has changed. One of the major changes that has happened in both countries, the U.S. and Colombia, is where possible, you want to keep families together, right? So if we can, instead of taking a child out of a home, provide resources, training, education, support, community, love, that's better for everyone.
Yeah.
So one of the takeaways I had from that conversation was that adoption is totally possible for me, but it's a little harder as a solo parent.
Sure.
You know, whether you're in the U.S. doing it domestically or doing it abroad, it's a little harder.
Right.
So I didn't rule it out. I just was exploring that emotionally while simultaneously going through a fertility journey.
Gotcha. So do you feel like you had support around you from your family, from your friends when you're like, I'm going to be a single or solo parent by choice? Or were they like, what the hell are you doing?
Oh my gosh. Yes and no. Okay. So one thing that really surprised me is I thought my parents' generation would be really anti this. You can't do this alone. Yeah. It's too hard. Right?
I'm older than you, but I'm guessing, you know, my parents are in their 80s now, but even like 60, 70, they might be like, what in the world? This is not like.
And I was totally worried that would be a difficult conversation with my parents, or that they would have a hard time telling their friends.
Right.
I was so wrong about that.
Oh.
Right? Like I had people come up to me who never got to have kids, or who had lost children, who had had infant loss or miscarriages. And they said, you know, look, or divorce early on. And they said, my life didn't turn out the way I wanted it to because this was not a choice I got to make when I was your age. Can you imagine? I didn't get to have this.
Wow.
They were like cheering me on.
I love it.
I know. They're such an amazing part of the community. So that was ridiculously supportive.
Sure.
And in fact, my mom threw herself a baby shower. It was ostensibly for me, but it was really like all her friends. It was like, look, I get to have a great kid.
Right.
She has other great kids, but she threw herself a baby shower.
Nice.
And her friends were so supportive. Now, my friends were, initially I started to tell a couple people and I got some pushback. You're too young. I was 36 or 37 when I started talking about this. So I wasn't too young by any means. No. You don't need to do this. This is crazy. You'll find somebody. Just keep waiting. And so for me, I learned very quickly to only share this with certain friends. You know those people that are going to have your back no matter what, right? If you're like, I'm boarding a plane and come with me, or like, I'm lighting a torch to my life and I'm doing something totally different. They're like, awesome, girl, get it.
Yeah.
You know? Yes. Right? And those people are few and far between, but there are some people like that in my life. So those are the people I told. And then the way I describe it for people who are thinking about this and want to protect their heart in the process is start with that core. And then the more certain you become, the more you can open up to the concentric circle until now I'm the person who will tell strangers, oh, yeah, that kid was donor conceived and I'm a solo parent. And there's no shame. There's no doubt. There's no uncertainty. If they look at me funny, I look at them funny back. Like, no big deal.
Gotcha.
But I wasn't like that at first.
What helped you get there?
A couple things. I did a couple things that I had to spend money on and a couple things that were totally free. So when I tell people to do the reflection about what you want your family to look like, the thing that was expensive for me was I invested in coaching. And if that's within your financial purview, if that's available to you, I highly recommend it. Right. You know, people who love you and are paid to love you, weird, can ask great questions and they can hold you accountable for the answers. And if you can't afford coaching, pick a friend who's really good at asking the hard questions. Right. The other thing I did that I invested in myself around was I took a big trip and, you know, did a lot of meditation on that trip. And, you know, sometimes getting out of your physical environment and the people you see day to day is healthy. Yeah. But the free things I did were journaling incessantly, like pages and pages and pages and pages of journals. In fact, a friend was at my house helping me reorganize my closet and found all my journals and was like, why are you holding on to these? Right. This is how I became who I became. Right. So yeah, those are the two things I think
that helped you to get there. Okay. Yeah. What about therapy? Did you think about therapy at all?
Yeah, I had done therapy when I was younger, and I think it's a wonderful tool and resource. The therapy I did at the time was really to get comfortable with a different part of who I was and, you know, work through some stuff from my childhood. And so I felt like I was sort of at that part. But becoming a solo parent or making a decision around what kind of family you want is all about your identity. It's all about what your hopes, your dreams are, where you want to go with your life. And then it's also about like getting rid of the voice in your head that says you can't. Getting rid of whatever society's telling you. So it does require work. You can't say, okay, I've just ingested 35 years of information from what society tells me is acceptable and normal. And go in a different direction without having done some kind of work around it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I'm sure you've done some of these things yourself, too.
100%. Yes. Coaching, therapy, journal, all of the things. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something most pregnant women aren't getting enough of, omega-3 DHA. The recommendation is over 200 milligrams a day, but less than 5% of pregnant women in the U.S. meet that. That's one of the reasons I love Ritual's Essential Prenatal. It has 350 milligrams of vegan DHA, plus other key nutrients like methylated folate and choline to support baby's neural tube development. As an OBGYN, I appreciate that Ritual goes beyond the basics. The formula is science-backed, third-party tested for heavy metals and microbes, and every ingredient is traceable. And the delayed release design, it's gentle on the stomach, something that really matters, especially if there's trouble with nausea during pregnancy. You deserve to know exactly what you're putting into your body, especially when it comes to prenatal multivitamins. And with Ritual's dedication to traceable science and sourcing, you always will. See for yourself with 25% off your first month at ritual.com/Dr. Nicole. Start Ritual or add Essential Prenatal to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/Dr. Nicole for 25% off your first month. So you decide that you are going to get a sperm donor.
Yeah.
What was it like choosing a sperm donor? You mentioned there's good, there's bad, and there's ugly.
Oh my God, yes. Well, the first thing is I have interviewed a number of people on my podcast, and I always ask them that question. How did you choose yours? Whether it's a sperm donor, an egg donor, embryo donor, whatever. I have never once heard the same answer to that question. It's like a fingerprint. Like everyone has a different thing they're looking for. So I was looking for intelligence, which is impossible to measure, and kindness, which is impossible to measure. And then just general, like, did this kid look like somebody that I would want to, the DNA that I would want to carry on. And when I made the decision to do this, by the time I was at the point of sperm donor, what's that? There's like a statement about when you're dating somebody and you feel uncertainty or conflict or like stress. That's usually a sign that they're not into you or that there's tension. And then when you feel calm and certainty and ease. That's when you know that things are kind of vibing. When I knew that I was on the right path, this is solo parenting, and that I would pick the right sperm donor, both cases I felt that like settling in your body. Like, oh, yeah, this is it. But I did call on my friends. And I'd heard of people having like these big parties where you like open up the sperm book or like, in this case, it's a website. It's almost like a dating app. And you like get drunk and you talk about all the different guys together. And I thought, I was like, that's going to be the way I do it. No. I decided like it felt too vulnerable to do that in that context. So it's very much like online shopping. I went through, I did my whole, was looking for GPA. I was looking for certain things. And I reviewed all the hundreds of guys that they had on there and then put like the top contenders in a basket. Like I put a little like next to them. And then I gave 3 very close friends my login. And I said, look at the ones I've liked. And tell me what I might be missing. And one guy who seemed amazing, my friends were like, oh my God, I'm reading egotist, narcissist, crazy person. And I was like, I didn't see that. You know? And then everyone sort of just said, this is the guy. And it was the one I had been leaning towards. So that was like, yeah.
Well, that's good. That's good. Did you have a lot of options to choose from?
Yes, because it was just at the beginning of the pandemic. As I understand it, the sperm banks have limited options now because there have been a lot more people who have in the pandemic needed sperm for various reasons, and it's been harder to get sperm.
Right.
Like anything, there's a supply chain problem.
Sure.
One of the areas which is really challenging for the sperm banks is getting people of color.
Yes.
So I'm lucky in that I am blonde, and pretty much anyone who looks remotely like me would suffice, although I was pretty flexible.
Right.
The question of race comes up quite a bit. If you're parenting a child that doesn't look exactly like you, how does that feel? And comes up in adoption, as you well know. And so, but my options were more available.
Okay.
Just by nature of my ethnic background. And unfortunately, it's very hard for them to get sperm donors of color. And we need that, right? We need to enable families of all backgrounds to have children that look like them if that's what they want.
Yeah. I've heard, someone sent me an article once. I mean, it's almost like you have to grab somebody immediately, or else it's like the option is gone for people of color, for Black women. So definitely something that I hadn't been aware of until fairly recently. Yeah.
It's such an unfair disparity, right? It just like everything in life, there are things that are just unfair, and we really should try and correct them.
Yeah.
One of the other things I will encourage anyone who's considering a sperm donor, and that may be a solo parent, it may be somebody whose male partner is experiencing infertility,
right?
Which is, by the way, 50% of infertility is male factor, and maybe gay and lesbian women, maybe a trans couple, who knows?
Right.
One thing I would encourage you to think about is the donor anonymous? And I sort of wrote that off. The donor I picked has chosen to be anonymous, which means technically and legally, neither my son nor I can go find him.
Okay.
In this day and age, that's tricky to enforce with Ancestry.com. But after having him talked to a number of donor-conceived people, I have come to understand that there is a lot of emotional nuances around having the ability to access one half of your identity, one half of your DNA.
Right.
Whether it's for medical records or just to know who they are as a human. And so that's become a very hot touch point, in the donor-conceived world, where people are looking at creating legislation like they have in the UK to make it so that anonymous donors are not an option, to make it so that, the sperm banks are legally responsible to go get updated medical information. You're a doctor, and having medical history can be a game changer when it comes to certain diseases. So, there's a lot that I credit the sperm donor and the donor conception industry for making my dreams come true. And I think it's so amazing that we can create families in this way. But there's a lot that could evolve to make it a little more equitable for everyone. And a little bit more fair for the donor conceived people.
Yeah, absolutely. So was this whole process expensive, and did your insurance cover anything?
Oh my God, it was so expensive.
Okay. you're like, yeah, girl, it was pricey.
Oh my God. And let's talk about that, because, some of the things that I just identified, recruiting more donors, making sure that they're not anonymous, making sure that we get access to their medical history, and one more, which is putting donor limits in place right now.
Yes, yeah.
In Europe, you can only have a certain number of offspring so if you donate, you can only have a couple, I think the limit is like 10.
Right.
In the US, there are guidelines, but no legal limits.
Okay.
So my kid could have 10, 20, 60 siblings.
Right.
That's scary.
Very.
I have interviewed somebody who accidentally dated her brother. I mean, it is a very scary thing, but it's also scary for the kid. How are they going to emotionally navigate 60 relationships?
Right.
Many of the sperm banks are trying to work on this. There is attempts at legislating it. But all the things I just said that are good for people who are building families and good for the donor-conceived people, also in a supply-demand equation, make it so that there are fewer donors or they can donate less frequently. Yeah. And what does that do? It increases the price. It makes it less accessible financially.
Yeah.
So it's this push-pull. Do you keep it affordable and accessible? And then you have all these other problems.
Right.
Or do you fix those other problems and the price point changes?
Right.
And neither, it's like one of those catch-20s. It's not good either way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. It
is.
I saw some crazy story. I think it was in Europe, and this man had like 100-something children. Like it was like they finally had to ban him from like stop it. It's crazy. It's crazy.
And in Europe, they'll say no more,
right?
Or they'll fine the sperm banks or whatever. But here,
It's just sort of like, yeah, okay.
It's frowned upon.
Okay. So did you have any trouble getting pregnant?
Luckily, I mean, trouble's an interesting word. Luckily, I think the amount of time it took me was within the normal band of somebody my age with my hormone levels.
Okay.
I think if I were trying at home with a partner, the rule of thumb is approximately 3 to 6 tries.
Actually, we don't even say infertility technically until a year of trying.
That's right. So I did 2 at-home inseminations that were unmedicated. It was the pandemic. The fertility clinics were closed. It was like, let's just try this. Yeah. And then I did 3 IUIs, which is when you use a catheter to insert it into your cervix, past your cervix into your uterus. And it was the third IUI, the second medicated IUI that was ultimately successful. So I think that's within the band.
Yeah, I think so. Was it stressful for you, or how did you feel during the time?
That's an excellent question. I think it wasn't so stressful. I think I sort of had a lot of faith that now looking back, I realize was probably unrealistic. Like, oh yeah, this will just happen. And now that I know more about the stats, I realize it was probably a little too optimistic. There was one day that I remember feeling like the world was ending. My life was over. Sure. I was never going to be okay again. Right. And I called a friend like absolutely bawling, and they gently suggested, might it be the hormones you're on? Maybe it's so you forget, like, you're combining disappointment and like heartbreak with hormones, and that is brutal.
That's a rough combination. All right. So what was your pregnancy like, and your prenatal care like? Did you ever feel judged, or how did you navigate saying I'm a solo parent?
Yeah. So my ultimate prenatal care was tremendous.
Okay.
However, before that, before I was even trying to conceive, I had a couple of incidents with doctors and or medical professionals that were so enraging. One of which was when I froze my eggs, I used a different clinic. And when I would get to the clinic to do what they do, and you know this, is they do blood work, and they do, give me the ultrasound, the uterine ultrasound. Right. And they're doing this at different times to figure out how your eggs are progressing and then all that stuff. You know all this. There would be times when I'd walk in, the nurse would say, "Where's your partner?" Or "Is your husband here?" Which makes so many assumptions. And there was one time where I had to go somewhere else for imaging. I think I had a cyst which had ruptured or something like that. Right. And the tech that was doing the ultrasound, I was naive and bubbly and walked in. And I was like, I'm just getting my levels checked, and I'm, maybe eventually gonna go ahead and use these eggs or whatever. And she goes, "Well, what's wrong with your husband? What's wrong with your husband that you might need a sperm donor?" And I said, what do you mean? I mean, to me, I was enraged because
it's none of your business.
It's none of your business. It assumes I have a husband. Right. It assumes I want a husband. It assumes I'm straight.
Right. All of the things.
Right. And let's just play out the scenarios. Best case scenario, you've insulted somebody who is solo parenting or gay by assuming that they would have a male partner. Worst case scenario is I do have a male partner, and he is in fact very sick. Right. And you just said, "What's wrong with your husband?" Right. I do hope that we're training our medical professionals a little bit more sensitivity.
Sure. Yeah. That's completely unacceptable and unnecessary. It always baffles me how people think they have this sort of right to go there, and it's like you don't actually. Yeah. But you said you felt like your prenatal care was fine.
My prenatal care was great. I benefit from having a best friend who is also an OBGYN.
Oh, that helps.
And so whether or not I was getting the information from my doctor is almost irrelevant because I was calling her every day.
Right.
And we have these neighbors. We all live in the same neighborhood. And we have these neighbors who are teenagers. And I remember 3 days before I gave birth, I was sitting on the stoop, very anxious about the delivery process. And for me, one of the things society had told me by showing me pictures and images and advertisements or whatever about the birthing experience was that your husband rushes you to the hospital just in time to deliver, right?
Which is completely not true.
Right. I had developed this intense anxiety that I wasn't going to get to the hospital because I didn't have a husband. Right. Who's going to take me? Right. So I had backup plan upon backup plan. So much. That anxiety was so strong that I almost was like, I can't become a solo parent. I don't have a husband to drive me to the hospital.
Oh, see how your brain does that to you sometimes. Yeah.
It was just crazy. So she sat me on the stoops, and our high school neighbor was sitting there next to me, and she walked me through. You're going to walk in this door. You're going to tell this person you're in labor. They're going to know. Right. They're going to take you to this place. You wait till your contractions are this level. Then you're going to be wheeled in here. Then you ask for the epidural, literally minute by minute.
Right.
And if it goes wrong, this is what happens. And this poor 15-year-old is going, what happened?
What? I'm not ready for this. Yeah.
Right.
That is funny.
And coincidentally, that friend happened to be on the floor at the time I was delivering. I was like, can I stay and watch? And so we had a party. We had, she was there, my OBGYN was there, my mom was there, and then 2 female nurses. And people would walk into the room and be like, whoa, this is really fun.
Yeah, that's a nice energy to have surrounding birth. Yeah. So then your mom was your primary support person?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I did have a doula in case my mom needed some extra support. Okay. But my mom got to cut the cord, which she still talks about. Yeah.
I love it. And do you feel like having a doula was helpful?
I do. I think having gone through the experience I did with just surrounded by female energy and being told, wow, this is different by doctors or whomever would walk in, texts, I feel like we're missing that female camaraderie, birth party that other cultures may have.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Who's usually in the room when you are there delivering?
It's dad, a nurse, maybe a doula. Usually 2 nurses, dad, and maybe a doula.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's nice for the other parent, the non-birthing parent, but I kind of miss everyone come in, let's party. Right.
Yeah. And sometimes there are more people, there may be the grandparents or that kind of thing. So definitely in general, I think the energy of the room makes a difference for all involved. So I can totally see how a nice party atmosphere would be fun.
Yeah.
So then what was your support like postpartum?
Postpartum was great. I actually moved in with my parents for a couple of months.
Oh, okay. So do they live near you or?
They don't. They live near me 4 months out of the year.
Okay.
So I was able, when they're here, they're incredible at watching him for a couple of hours. Sure. But when they're not, I really feel like, oh my gosh, I'm missing something.
Yeah.
But I moved in with them for a couple of months, and it's hard to be in somebody else's space when you're bloated and leaking and, not feeling like your best self. And I didn't love my dad watching me breastfeed around the clock. Yeah. But I had to get over that. I don't know that he'll ever recover from that.
I'm just laughing because my dad wouldn't even go, once we were teenagers, he wouldn't even go down the hallway where our rooms were because it's I'm not involved in any of that. So I can totally see how your dad might be this is a lot for me.
It was a lot for him. He's a trooper, but you've got a screaming kid. I'm crying. Everything's leaking. And it just has to happen. Right. So avert your eyes.
Right.
Please.
Right.
But I was really lucky. In that because just to have somebody else there and not be alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that was my biggest fear. And I think it's one of the misnomers. Many solo parents are alone. But solo doesn't always mean alone. It doesn't mean that you don't have friends who stop in or other people who love you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it sounds like did you have a decent leave policy from your job?
Yeah, I did. I didn't want to go back as soon as I did. I took a couple months off and then had a really hard time coming back and sort of negotiated, can I take 1 more month part-time? And I don't actually recommend that because part-time didn't mean these are the hours I'm working, these are the hours I'm not working. Yeah, it meant all of a sudden I'm working and holding a screaming child simultaneously. And that was it's horrible for the people I work with. It was horrible for the baby. It was horrible for me. That was not good.
Yeah. And part-time probably is almost full time, but not,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? Like you think, yeah. So it's not exactly really full, part time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I was lucky that I was able to breastfeed. I had some hard parts in my journey, but I was able to do it in the end. And then when I stopped breastfeeding, all of a sudden I felt like I had so much free time because, I'm not rushing to go pump several times a day. And I was pumping at like 11 p.m. at night to get that like extra few ounces. And so to be able to go to bed and not be like strapped to a machine. I mean, it was like going from full-time to part-time, except that I worked the same number of hours.
Yeah, I always called breastfeeding a labor of love because your whole world revolves around it for a while. Like, when is the next time I can pump? When is so it's definitely an investment of your time and energy. So then what are two or three things that you have learned that are different about parenting a donor-conceived child? Things that come to mind for me are like, asking about the other parent or filling out forms or things like that. I mean, that's sort of simplistic, but what are some things that you've noticed that are different?
It is simplistic, and it's not, because that's what your day-to-day is made up of. It's made up of communicating with your child and then dealing with like the logistics of parenting. So little things like, I don't feel any shame about my choice, but I was at the post office trying to get him a passport. Again, optimistic. We haven't used it, but I had to go back 3 or 4 times. And partly because I had incomplete forms that were my fault, partly it was their fault. But a couple of times I got so much crap from somebody who said, well, I need the other partner here in order, like, where's the other parent? We can't sign these forms without the other parent. And I would have to like point out the point in the birth certificate, and then they'd call over a supervisor and be like, is this okay? Yeah, it's okay. On the birth certificate, there is no other parent. So I don't need somebody else's approval to get a passport.
Right.
That was really frustrating and hard.
I'm sure.
And it would have been harder if I felt guilt or shame about it. I didn't. I was just like, come on, guys, pull it together.
Yeah.
Be better than this. You're absolutely right that the conversations around where is your dad are going to be hard. At one point, a babysitter said to me, this was early on, like 3 months, 4 months in, oh, like, why doesn't this child have a dad? And she like made up an excuse and lied about it. And I said, you should not lie. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
So it's making sure that everyone around him is having good conversations. He has a cousin who started making fun of him at one point for not having a dad. And luckily her parents are very well informed on this. And in fact, her dad grew up in the same way that my child is growing up.
Okay.
So I think it's not just educating yourself about how to communicate with your child. It's educating the people that they come in contact with.
Sure.
Making sure that the teachers are aware.
Right.
Making sure that family members know what to say. Right. My mom, for instance, was reading books, and in books they have dads. And so she was like skipping over the page that had a dad or changing it to somebody else. No, it's okay. He can know that dads exist.
Right.
And then it's really informing yourself about the issues that donor-conceived people might face as they grow up. And I expect there's going to be a lot of parenting around that.
Okay. That makes sense. So then as we wrap up, what would you say the most frustrating part of being a solo mom by choice has been?
I love that I get him full-time. Like, I love that I don't have to share him, that all these amazing moments are mine. Every once in a while, you want somebody to tap in. Like, he's woken up 5 times tonight. Can somebody else just rock him to sleep? Yeah. Exactly.
I can totally see that.
Like, he just looked me in the face and like smacked me across the face, and I am frustrated, and I don't know that I can be a great parent in this moment. Can somebody else participate? But no.
Yeah. I can totally see that. And then on the flip side, what has been the best or most rewarding part of being a single mom by choice?
I mean, he's just the best. Like, every little moment with him is so joyful. And we as parents who work don't get a lot of time with our kids. I was really surprised by that. I was like, oh, you spend time with your kids. No, our work life is not structured for the hours that kids are awake. So those moments are precious, even if they're really, really, really hard.
Sure.
And I'm surprised, too, by how many people are saying, oh, you're going down this path. May I ask you about it? I might want to do it, too. Like, I think it's becoming more of a thing than it used to be. And that's great. It's not for everyone. Some people ask me about it. I say, maybe you don't want to go down this path. It's not my choice to say that for you, but just because it's good for one person doesn't mean it's good for everyone. And I'm excited that more and more people are exploring it.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder if that comes along with people, more and more women exploring like egg freezing,
yes,
things like that. That conversation is kind of growing.
I think, and I'd be curious about your opinion, I think if you can afford it, you should absolutely freeze your eggs.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And the younger you can do it, the more eggs you'll get. So if you can, yeah, for sure.
Totally.
If you have a job that gives you that benefit, definitely take advantage of it. It's much better to do it and then not need it than get to a situation where you don't have it. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And it's not a guarantee. I mean, you could do it, have them, and it not work anyway, but it's a little bit nicer.
It definitely gives you more options.
Yeah. Somebody said to me in an email today, they said, either our moms raised the girls right in that they choose these bold moves like becoming solo parents, or we raised our boys wrong. There's like terrible partnership opportunities out there.
Which one? Yes.
Either culture's changing and it's becoming more acceptable, or our men are just failing.
Yeah. So then last question, what is your favorite piece of advice that you would give to someone who is thinking about whether or not they want to be a single or solo parent rather by choice?
I think you know what's in your heart. And if this is your path, don't let anyone get in your way. But if you're not convinced that this is your path, it's not an easy path to walk for sure.
Yeah. And I guess, do communities exist? Like Facebook groups or those kinds of things to help people?
Thank you for asking about that. There's a really robust Facebook group.
Okay.
And there's solo parents by choice. There's solo moms by choice, solo dads by choice, solo parents in whatever community, solo parents in dating. I mean, you name it.
Okay.
I think it's the reason I'm still on Facebook. These communities are great. And you can ask anything. And the other thing I would recommend as a new parent, whether or not you're solo, is if there's a new moms community in your area, and there was one for me where they like put everyone together, and now we have a text chain of all the new moms that have kids that are like 3 weeks apart from one another in the area.
Right.
It's a game changer because you're like, this weird thing is happening today, and the other person's like, that happened to me yesterday, and it just normalizes some of the stuff you go through. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So where can people find you and your podcast?
Oh, thank you. So the podcast is called Stork'd, STORK''D, and it can be found anywhere you listen to podcasts. There's also storkedpodcast.com, which is the website. And on that website is an option to sign up for the newsletter. Okay. I really like the newsletter. If you don't like listening to things or you don't always have time, the newsletter is a great digestible piece. Yeah. And Instagram, Stork'd_podcast.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. This has been really insightful and informative, and I know folks are going to find it useful.
Oh, it's so fun to chat with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, wasn't that a great episode? I learned a lot, and I hope that you did too. Now, after every episode, when I have a guest on, I do something called Dr. Nicole's Notes, where I talk about my top takeaways from the conversation. And here are my Dr. Nicole's notes from my conversation with Julia. Number 1, community is important. Julia is lucky, fortunate that she had a lot of help and support in her choice to be a solo mom by choice. And support is so important, whether you're a solo mom or not, by choice or by circumstance or whatever the case may be, whether there's 2 parents in the household, all of us need some support. And one of the places where you can find support that I think can be really helpful, as long as you get the right type of support, is virtual communities. And that's the community I've created with my Inner Circle Facebook group. It's an open community. You can come, you can join, you can ask questions, you can connect with other people. An example of how these type of connections and things can help. Recently, someone posted about how they were moving to a new area and they needed to find a new OBGYN. And because of asking in the group, they were able to get hooked up with somebody who, was like more of a referral. They didn't have to do a lot of that legwork to look for people. They were able to get connected with someone. And there are just lots of connections like that inside of the group. So head to Facebook and search for Dr. Nicole Rankins in our Circle community, and it will pop up right there. We'd love to have you join. Okay, next thing I want to talk for just a couple minutes about actually is egg freezing and clear up some of the misconceptions or talk about some of the realities of egg freezing, because I think a lot of people don't know exactly what those numbers and things are. So egg freezing, of course, is when you freeze your eggs, and success rates for egg freezing depend on a lot of factors, including the age the woman is when her eggs are frozen, the quality of the eggs, and then how the eggs were frozen. All right. So according to one large study, the overall chance of a live birth from frozen eggs is 39%. Okay. 39%. However, the chances increased to 51% for women who were younger than 38 when they froze their eggs. Okay. Younger than 38 when they froze their eggs. And then the chances increased to 70% if the woman was younger than 38 and also thawed 20 or more eggs. All right. So your chances are higher if you are younger and if you have more eggs. Okay. And then another thing was the freezing method. All right. So the survival rate of eggs after thawing depends on how they were frozen. Eggs frozen using the flash freezing or vitrification technique. And I don't know all the specifics and details of this. This is not something that I do a lot into or get into a lot. So I'm just telling you what the names are. They have an average survival rate of 90 to 95%. So the flash freezing technique, 90 to 95% of the eggs will survive after thawing. In comparison with the slow frozen eggs, they have an average survival rate of 61%. So if you are thinking about freezing your eggs, then definitely consider your age and definitely consider how they are frozen. Okay. And then you also want to be prepared for the cost of egg freezing. It can be pretty substantial. Each egg retrieval cycle can cost on the order of $10,000. All right. And the number of eggs you get is really going to vary. And the only way to have a lot of eggs afterwards may be that you have to do multiple cycles. So that can get quite expensive. And then it's going to cost another potentially $5,000 to $7,000 to thaw and then fertilize the eggs, grow the embryos in the lab, and then transfer them back into your uterus. All right. So that's another $5,000 to $7,000. All right. Also, if you want to have them tested for any chromosome problems, that can add an additional cost. That's going to be another potentially $3,000. And then the last potential cost, which is also pretty hefty, is storing the eggs. Storing frozen eggs can cost up to $1,000 a year. So you pay, $10,000, $20,000 up front, and then you can anticipate to be paying $1,000 a year in order to store the eggs. So potentially significant cost there. Now, I know some companies, just a sprinkle of companies, do offer some financial assistance with egg freezing. Big companies like Google, for instance, may help pay for freezing the eggs. I don't know if they pay for the storage cost, but just know that it can be a very, very expensive endeavor and it's not guaranteed to work. Okay. All right. And then the last thing I want to say is that let's all just make an effort. Let's all be sure that we just mind our own business. You know what I mean? Like people asking about people's family choices, whether someone is a solo mom, sperm donors, things like that. But yeah, it's natural to have a curiosity about people's lives. And if people are willing and express an interest in talking about something, sure, that's different. But don't go asking about other people's business. Let's just mind our own business and support people in ways that don't interfere with trying to get into their personal lives. Okay. So let's just make an effort all together. We are all going to be supportive, but also let's mind our own business. Okay. All right. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, do me a solid, share it with a friend. I'd love your help to reach and serve more people. Do subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to me right now. Leave me a review in Apple Podcast or send me a DM on Instagram. I love to hear from you. I also love to get pictures. I love to see pictures, not just of the babies. Of course, I love to see pictures of babies, but I like to see pictures of you too with the baby. So send me pictures, DM me on Instagram. Let me know that the podcast has helped you or what you think about the show or any podcast topics. At Dr. Nicole Rankins, my DMs are open. So that's it for this episode. Do come on back next week and remember that you deserve a beautiful pregnancy and birth.